200 feet of vertical ladder, climbed in the dark, before the shift starts. He was 22, and he was carrying his lunch and a bottle to urinate in, because there is no bathroom where he is going, and he will not come down for 9 hours. 16 years later, the same man clears $240,000 a year and no longer touches a crane. Fewer than 1 in 10 people who operate cranes in America ever run a tower. Most spend a career on the ground looking up at one. And the thing that decides who goes up is not skill with the levers. We will get to it. Most people think a crane operator is the person who moves the load. That is the smallest part of it. The operator usually cannot see the load. On a tower crane, the hook is often 200 feet below and behind a building, and the person who can see it is standing on the ground with a radio. The operator is executing instructions from someone else's eyes while holding a suspended weight steady in wind. So the job is not spatial skill. It is trust, discipline, and a refusal to move on an instruction you did not clearly hear. That single fact reorganizes the whole ladder, because the rungs are not about who is best at the controls. They are about who is trusted with the consequence. Let's start at the bottom. The oiler earns $22.40 an hour, about $46,600 a year before overtime. Most of them are 20 to 24. You are assigned to a machine, and you are not allowed to run it. You grease fittings, check fluid levels, inspect wire rope inch by inch looking for broken strands, sweep the deck, and set out the outrigger pads. You walk the site before anyone arrives, and you walk it again after everyone leaves. When the operator climbs, you stay on the ground. Getting in requires a high school diploma, a clean driving record, and in most markets, an application to a local of the operating engineers. That is genuinely the whole barrier at this rung. Around a third leave inside 2 years, and almost none of them leave because the work is hard. They leave because it is slow. You are watching someone else do the interesting thing for 2 years. Here is what nobody tells you. The oiler year is an audition, and everyone on that site knows it except the oiler. Operators recommend the ones who inspect the rope without being asked, because a broken strand nobody caught is the operator's death, not the oiler's. Get recommended and the apprenticeship opens. Before the ladder goes any further, there is something about how a lift actually works that explains every rung above this one. On a blind pick, meaning any lift where the operator cannot see the load, one person and only one person speaks. That is the signal person. Not the foreman, not the superintendent, not the owner standing next to them. One voice, on one channel, for the whole lift. If the radio drops out, the operator stops the load and holds it. If a second voice comes on the channel, the operator stops the load and holds it. Hand signals exist for the same reason, and they are standardized across the country, so a crew from another state can work a crane on the first morning without a conversation. The signal person is usually paid less than the operator and outranks the operator completely for the duration of the lift. Nobody outside the trade believes this until they see a $200,000 a year operator sit motionless because a 26-year-old on the ground stopped talking mid-sentence. The apprentice operator earns $26 an hour, rising to about $44 by the final period. So roughly $54,100 in the first year and $91,500 in the last. Most start at 24. Now you run machines. You start on the smallest equipment on the yard and you work up, and every hour is logged. You learn load charts, which is the part people do not expect, because it is arithmetic with consequences. A crane's capacity is not one number. It changes with boom length, with radius, with counterweight configuration, and with whether the machine is on outriggers or on rubber. And reading that chart wrong is how a machine tips. You also learn to feel the swing, because a suspended load is a pendulum, and stopping the rotation does not stop the load. Getting in means selection into an apprenticeship. Typically 3 to 4 years with documented seat time plus classroom. The program is paid, which is why applications outnumber slots heavily in strong locals. Somewhere between 15 and 25% do not finish. Almost nobody washes out on the controls. They wash out on load charts and on the written work, because the trade quietly requires more maths than the recruiting brochure suggests. Here is what nobody tells you. The machines you are assigned during apprenticeship shape the next 20 years. Get put on tower work early, and you build tower hours. Get put on excavators, and you may never leave the ground. The mobile crane operator earns $42 to $54 an hour, roughly $87,400 to $112,300 a year, with normal overtime. Most reach it between 25 and 32. You run a crane that drives to the job, sets up on outriggers, does the lift, and leaves. Every setup is a new problem. You are reading ground conditions, because the ground is what actually holds the machine, and a pad, placed over a buried utility vault, is how a crane ends up on its side. You calculate the pick before you make it, every time, even the small ones, because the small ones are where operators get casual. You work in traffic, near power lines, and beside people who do not understand that the load can swing. Getting here means completing the apprenticeship and holding a national certification, which is written and practical and has to be renewed. Attrition is low, under 5%, and the people who leave usually leave for the same reason, which is that mobile work means a different site every few days, and the driving adds up. Here is what nobody tells you. This is where most crane operators finish. It pays well, it is skilled, and there is no force pushing you upward. The move to tower work is something you have to go and take. Something about tower cranes that almost nobody outside construction knows. The crane grows. A tower crane is not built to its final height on day one. It is erected to a starting height, and then as the building rises, the crane climbs itself. A hydraulic climbing frame lifts the entire upper section, the cab and the jib and the counterweight, off the top of the mast, opening a gap, and a new mast section is fed in and pinned. Then it does it again. A crane that started at 80 feet ends the job at 600. On some buildings, the crane is tied into the structure as it goes, and on others it stands free the whole time. This is why the crane is the first thing on a site and the last thing off it, and it is why removing the crane at the end is a construction project of its own rather than a cleanup task. Remember that part. The tower crane operator earns $58 to $74 an hour, about $120,600 to $153,900 a year, and in a handful of major city markets, considerably more. Most reach it between 28 and 38. You climb an internal ladder in the dark before the site opens, in whatever weather exists, and you stay in a cab the size of a phone box for the entire shift. You do not see the load most of the time. You listen. You develop a relationship with one signal person that becomes close to telepathic, and when that person is off sick, the whole day slows down. You move steel, concrete, formwork, and other people's safety, and you do it in wind that moves a suspended load in a way the person on the ground cannot always predict. Getting here needs tower-specific certification on top of the mobile qualification, plus somebody willing to give you the seat, which in strong markets is the actual bottleneck. There is no washout rate that means anything, because the filter is who gets offered the seat. Here is what nobody tells you. The isolation is the part that ends careers, not the height. 9 hours a day alone in a box with a radio suits a specific kind of person, and operators who thought they wanted it sometimes discover in the first month that they do not. Everyone asks the same question first, and the trade is tired of it, but the answer explains the job better than anything else. There is no bathroom. The operator climbs before the shift, and coming down means the crane stops, and the entire site stops with it, because every trade on that building is waiting on the hook. So operators carry a bottle, and they manage what they drink, and the good ones plan the day around it. It sounds like a joke, and it is not. It is the clearest illustration of the actual job, which is that the operator is a single point of failure for 200 people. Everything about the way the work is organized follows from that, including the pay, including the isolation, and including the fact that an operator who feels unwell says so immediately rather than pushing through, because the alternative is worse. The erection crew earns $68 to $86 an hour with premium, roughly $165,000 to $205,000 a year on steady work. Most are in their 30s and 40s. This crew does not operate the crane. They build it, they climb it, and they take it down. They work at height on a structure that is partially assembled by definition, connecting mast sections, running pins, and rigging the counterweight in an order that cannot be varied. A mobile crane assists them, so the job is two cranes working together with people in between. Getting here requires ironworking or rigging experience, plus manufacturer-specific training on the exact crane model, because the assembly sequence is different for every make, and the manufacturer's procedure is the only correct one. There is no formal washout rate. What there is instead is self-selection, because a meaningful number of qualified people decline this work once they have seen it. Here is what nobody tells you. Disassembly is more dangerous than assembly. On the way up, the structure is getting stronger with every section. On the way down, it is getting weaker, and every pin you pull removes strength from something you are still standing on. On the 27th of April, 2019, at about 3:30 in the afternoon, a tower crane was being taken down at the corner of Mercer Street and Fairview Avenue in Seattle. 8 sections came off the building and fell into the street. 2 ironworkers on the crane died, Andrew Yoder, 31, and Travis Corbett, 33. 2 people driving past died, Sarah Wong, 19, and Alan Justade, 71. The State Labor Department investigated for 6 months and found that more than 50 pins had been pulled out of the mast before they should have been, which is a shortcut that speeds up disassembly. With the pins gone, the tower could not hold a wind gust above 45 miles an hour, and one arrived. Nothing about that day was a freak event. It was a procedure, skipped, in a hurry, on the last day of a job. The lift director, sometimes called the crane superintendent, earns $190,000 to $240,000 a year on large projects. Most are 40 and up. You stop operating and you start owning the plan. You write the lift plan for critical picks. You decide crane placement before the building exists. You approve rigging, and you say whether a lift happens today, given the wind forecast and the ground conditions, and the crew available. On a critical lift, you are physically present, and you have authority over everyone, including the general contractor's schedule. Getting here requires years in the seat, rigging depth, and a reputation that specific people will vouch for by name. There is no exam that produces this job. Here is what nobody tells you. The whole role comes down to being willing to stop work. Everyone on a site loses money when a crane stands still, and the lift director is the person who says it stands still anyway. People who cannot hold that line under pressure do not last, and the ones who can are the reason the number at the top of this ladder looks the way it does. There is a rung outside the ladder that pays more than most of it. Crane rental and erection companies are owned by people who came up through this trade, and a small outfit with 4 machines and a crew clears $300,000 to $700,000 in a strong year. The equipment is the problem. A single tower crane costs well into 7 figures, and it earns nothing sitting in a yard. So the business is a bet on the local construction cycle. When the cycle turns, the payments do not stop. A meaningful share of these companies do not survive their first downturn, and it is almost always the debt rather than the work that ends them. Oiler, $46,600. Apprentice, $54,100, rising to $91,500. Mobile operator, $112,300. Tower operator, $153,900. Erection crew, $205,000. Lift director, $240,000. Between 15 and 25% of apprentices never finish, and fewer than 1 in 10 operators ever runs a tower. The ladder is short, it is paid the whole way, and the rung that pays the most is the one where you stop touching the machine. Nobody warns you that the top of a trade is usually the moment you leave the part you loved. Next, every level of an offshore driller.